President Obama has at long last begun to commute some sentences. Now, he has broken records for the least amount of pardons and commutes during his sentence. He has not commuted very many at all. In fact, as far as drug crimes, even though his administration talks about how the laws were too stringent and has scaled them back in terms of how they're going to be applied in the future, in terms of what he's done in the past, he's only commuted 11 people for drug crimes in his entire 5 years in office, which is ridiculously low. But today, good news. He has commuted the sentences of 8 federal inmates. They've all spent at least 15 years in prison, and 6 were serving life sentences. And he said that their sentences would have already been up if the new rules were in place, that this was, quote, an unfair system. So it's great to see President Obama finally say that. And he said, quote, literally, if they had been sentenced under the current law, many of them would have already served their time and paid their debt to society, which is indisputably true. So it's a small step forward, but a very important one, especially because one of the people whose sentence was commuted was a person that we had been arguing in favor of for a long time here on the Young Turks. Stephanie George has been released. She is free at last. Now, this is a case we brought to you a long time ago. She got 3 strikes and hence was serving a life sentence. None of the strikes were for any violent offenses. In fact, the first 2 strikes were for selling 2 different instances of selling drugs for a combined $160. Okay? In reality, the 3rd strike, the person who had stashed the crack cocaine in her attic is the one who turned her in when he was caught. So it was very dubious to begin with whether she was at all responsible for the 3rd strike. She had 3 kids. She earned her GED in prison, and she had been in prison for a long time. She's 43 years old, but now she is free to go. Now, look, behind the scenes, we'd been working on this here at the Young Turks. We even were considering doing a documentary. We reached out to our lawyers. We even got one of the top lawyers, defense lawyers in the country, to work behind the scenes on this issue. Now, it was not us. And here's the interesting part of it, right? Her lawyers and her family said, hey, you know what? Let's give President Obama a chance to do the right thing and see if he commutes her sentence. And I have to be honest with you, I thought that was foolishly naive. President Obama, because of his track record, showed that he had no interest in commuting sentences or giving pardons. He gave far less of those 2 things than George W. Bush did. But I was wrong on this one. And I am relieved to report that I was wrong and ecstatic to see that Stephanie George, who had served far, far too long in prison, is now going to be released. And President Obama did the right thing. Now, the ACLU weighs in here and they say, look, there's a long way to go here, and there's still a lot of people in prison that shouldn't be. There's over 3,000 people in prison who are serving life sentences for non-violent offenses, right? And again, the president has a long way to go in catching up to even George W. Bush in terms of how many people's sentences he has commuted or people that he has pardoned. But they do say this is, quote, an incredibly important development. And it's true, the first step on the road is the most important step. So let's hope the president follows through and does more of this. So we're not interested in releasing dangerous people. Nobody's asking for that. We're saying people who've been sent to prison for far too long on minor offenses have been victims of the war on drugs, and it's time to let them out. And just as you can tell from here, I couldn't be more relieved that they finally let Stephanie George out, and their kids will see her soon.